You may not have any idea how honored and comfortable I am to be here tonight. I am a huge outdoorsman. I love the outdoors. In fact, with what I do at ESPN, a lot of it is doing radio shows throughout the country. And I probably do a variety of cities from Kansas City, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Cincinnati. And I'm the only NFL analyst that has probably done more radio shows from their tree stand and 11,000 feet up in elk country than any analyst in football. I love the outdoors, and it's an honor to be here with you. And just taking in all the greatness that is in this room, the hard work and the dedication, I want to congratulate each and every one of you award winners and everybody that's here tonight. And from a customer's perspective, Johnny Morris, thank you for your vision. Because every time I walk into a Bass Pro Shop, I love it, but I have a different perspective of it now. And I appreciate you and everybody in here that makes that a treat to go to. Thank you. I show that DVD for a couple of reasons. It's really an example of my life and the ability to live a dream and fight to live. And one thing encompasses those two moments in my life was a philosophy that I actually came up with as a young boy when I had set out to achieve the ultimate dream and goal of my life to play in the National Football League. Now, I've had opportunity to talk to a lot of people here, and I think we probably identified the one big Steeler fan here when the video came up at our table right here. But when I was about 8 years old, I was a Pittsburgh Steeler fan. My two favorite teams were the Pittsburgh Steelers and Chicago Bears, and I wanted to play in the National Football League. At 8 years old, I knew that's what I was going to do. Now, when you're 8, you share your dreams and your goals and your objectives with a lot of people. Anybody that'll listen, you share it. What I came to find out as I would share these goals and dreams, I didn't get the most positive feedback when I would share them with friends, families, coaches. People that are supposed to support you and there to encourage you always gave me things like, man, do you know how hard that's going to be? Do you know what the odds are? 0.01% of every high school kid in America that wants to play the NFL ever does. It's going to be hard, odds against you. And you know what? It's impossible. Pocatello, Idaho, nobody's ever went to the NFL from Pocatello, Idaho. Well, I will tell you this. I had a brother that's 14 years younger than me, and we shared the same room for as long as I could remember. A monumental change in our home was going to happen when I was 12 years old. I was going to finally get my own room. I cared about one thing in this room. I wanted one wall made of all cork. Now I talked to our contractor, which ended up being my dad, and asked him, could I get one wall made of cork? Now he, like you, probably thought, why do you want a wall made of cork? Two reasons. One, and I've never, even as I've went back and pondered and thought about this, I've never figured where it came or if it was just an internal instinct, but I wanted to put up goals. And I was going to be pinning things up and down. So I wanted to have something I could do that with. That's one. Two, if I start doing that to sheetrock in my brand new room, I don't see age 13. So I'm going to solve two things with this. He makes me a wall of cork. I remember my room getting done. My bed actually bumped up to the wall made of cork. And I remember the day that I was standing on my bed ready to pin up, I will play in the National Football League. As I went to pin that thing up, I got to admit that I started to think about how hard it was going to be. The odds being against me. The impossibility of it. And it was right then I was like, well, you know what? I got to find a way to beat the odds. I got to find a way, no matter how hard it is, what is required. The impossible thing is not true because I see him playing all day, all the time, every time I turn on the television. But it resonated and created action in me. So I jumped down, I got that 8x10 card, and I put find a way on the top and stuck it on the top of my wall. And from then on, every goal I had would be under that. Now here's what it did for me. It inspired action. Now I didn't know what the plan was ultimately going to be, but my boundaries went from here to here. It inspired action, a personal evaluation of what it was going to take. And then I was fortunate enough to stumble across a quote a few years later by Aristotle. that would really trigger things and set things off for me. And the quote is, "We are what we repeatedly do. Then excellence is not an act but a habit." I read that again. We are what we repeatedly do. Now, if you just think about that, we are what we repeatedly do. You are what you repeatedly do. Then excellence is not an act but a habit. I wanted to be excellent. It was going to require excellence. So I formulated great habits. I expanded my boundary, and because of that, I found that quote that resonated with me. Now, I also started thinking, I was running back at the time. That's what I wanted to be in the National Football League. The greatest football player in my eyes to ever walk on a football field happened to be a running back. And he played in Chicago. His name was Walter Payton. I read every article there was about Walter Payton. Every interview he had, I watched. I wanted to see what it took to play in the NFL. Now, he came out with this VHS. And I got to be careful because I got to stay on the time and dates this happened. They didn't have DVDs and CDs back then. I remember he advertised selling this VHS. He was going to talk about his training, his community service, his family, and playing in the National Football League. I had to have that tape. Well, I got the tape, and I was watching it. There was an interview process that he was going through, and this was shortly after becoming the all-time leading rusher. And the interviewer asked him, "What makes you better than everybody else?" And I will tell you this for just that quick split moment before he answered. I thought, here it is. He's got probably some special genetic gift that nobody else will ever have, and that's what makes him so great. Or maybe it's that protein drink, and if I find out where it is, I'm going to go buy it all. But he said something very profound. He said, "I want it more than they do every day of the week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You just see Sunday." And I thought, you know what? He's talking about a mindset. He has just gave me something that I can channel and use each and every day. I can want it more than everybody else. And how will that resonate? I applied it to how I practiced, how I trained, my schoolwork, and it did resonate when I played. Now, just to confirm that this is not some lip service because he was doing some videotape, I'm going to fast forward you some 15 years later from that point. I'm playing for the Chicago Bears. The same equipment managers and trainers that were there with Walter Payton were there when I played. One of my rules when I got taped before practice is I would have whoever's taping me, one of the trainers, give me a Walter Payton story. I want to know more about Walter Payton. I was fascinated by him. I even got to know Walter while I was there, and I admired him. One day I jumped up on the table, and my teammate, Maurice Douglas, goes, "I'll tell you a story. I was just like you. Couldn't wait to meet Walter Payton. Loved Walter Payton. Wanted to run the dirt hill like Walter Payton. I wanted to be like Payton." Now, he was drafted by the Chicago Bears, same time I was drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers. He said, "When I came in here to the Bears facilities, the first person that I got to meet was Walter Payton, and I asked him if I could train with him." And Sweetness said, "Absolutely." They set a date and a time. He said, "I couldn't sleep, couldn't wait for that time." He goes, "I got there early, I was ready, and here he pulls up in his red Ferrari. Gets out in his sweatbands and his Rouge headband. He goes, he just looks sweet." Now, that's not why they nicknamed him Sweetness. They nicknamed him Sweetness because of all of his amazing moves on the field is where he actually got his nickname from. But Mo was saying, I was so excited to actually be there and do something that I had watched for so many years with my hero. And he said we warmed up and we went to that dirt hill. And that's about a 50% grade, and it's 80 yards straight up. He said, we got to the bottom of that hill, and we bolted up to the top. He said, when I got to the top, he goes, I literally could see my chest popping out. He goes, I could hardly breathe. I was hyperventilating, and I failed to ask the most important question. How many? Well, on the way down, which was their rest period, he finally got his breath enough to say, how many? And Sweetness is, no, not breathing hard at all. He goes, we're going to run 10. Not the number Maurice Douglas was hoping for. They get to the bottom of the hill. He said, we started to go back up. He said, I got halfway, stopped, went to the bottom, puked, and went home. Most of that story I'd have kept the whole thing to myself. I don't think I'd have ever shared that with anybody else. But then he said something that I've never forgot and is as profound as when Walter Payton said it that day on that tape. He said, the bottom line is, he wants it more than I do. Walter Payton, 5'10", 205 pounds. Best running back to ever put on a pair of pads. Best football player to ever put on a pair of pads. Not the biggest, not the strongest, not the fastest. The best. Maurice Douglas, 5'10", 205 pounds. Good player. Faster than Walter Payton. He's a good player, though. That's what separated Walter Payton. I used that ingredient. I used Aristotle. And I believe it was those two things that really helped me make it to the National Football League. And I really believed I had an amazing formula. I had a formula that was going to allow me to have major success. Well, I was fortunate enough to play for the greatest coach to ever coach in the National Football League, Chuck Noll. I would learn something opening day in the preparation of that week for the first game that I would ever play against the San Francisco 49ers, who are expected to win it all this year. In fact, the 49ers go 15-1. They don't win the Super Bowl, but they had one loss. And it was opening day in Three Rivers. But as we were getting ready to play the San Francisco 49ers, at the end of every practice, everybody does their individual drills. And at the end of every practice, you come together and you run what we call team. It's a chance to run all of your plays and execute the things you've been individually working on. Well, this is a Friday, so it's really the last work day before you get ready to play on Sunday. And as we were going through our team plays, got in the huddle, the quarterback called a pass play. My assignment was to block an outside linebacker. If he doesn't come, I'm going to run a flat route. If the quarterback's smart, he'll throw it to me. Quarterback gets under center, snaps the ball, drops back, and throws it to the other side of the field to the wide receiver. That wide receiver takes the ball and starts to run. Halfway in between that, the whistle blows. Chuck Noll, Merril, what are you doing? He has never, ever, ever stopped a play to tell somebody they're doing a good job. So I know this is not good. But I immediately checked that outside linebacker because nothing can be worse than to miss a blitz assignment and have him stand around your quarterback. It's not a good thing. Well, he was dropped in coverage. My guy didn't blitz. I'd run the flat route 100 times. I did the right route. Ultimately, what was I doing? I really was doing nothing. I said, nothing. He said, that's the problem. He goes, you know I can get anybody out of the stands to check an outside linebacker and run a flat and do nothing? He goes, that's what common football players do. I did not keep you on this team to be a common football player. I need you to be uncommon. And when your wide receiver buddy has the ball over there, how do you know he's not going to fumble? You need to go over there and show up. How do you know you couldn't recover it? How do you know he's not going to break a tackle? And you could be the guy who makes the key block for a touchdown. And then he started into this tirade and this dissertation about being uncommon, doing more than what your job is asked you to do. More than the assignment I've been asked to do, I need you to be uncommon. We show up to the football. We do more than is required. Now, for those football fans in here, you will understand this. For those that are not football fans, I'll explain it real quick. There's a play called the Immaculate Reception. It's one of the greatest plays in NFL history in the playoffs. Terry Bradshaw throws the ball down the middle of the field. They're down by 3 points. They're playing the Oakland Raiders. It's a playoff game. And the ball bounces off of Frenchie Fuqua, Jack Tatum. We still don't know to this day. The ball bounces off in the air. Franco Harris ends up catching it just before it hits the ground, runs for a touchdown. Steelers win the last seconds. Here's the one thing that's most amazing about that play. Franco Harris had no business being around that football if he were a common player. But since Chuck had trained us to be uncommon and challenged us to be uncommon, he was around that football. He gave me the last piece of the puzzle that it would require for me to play in the National Football League and be a starter. He didn't ask me to become bigger, stronger, or faster. He asked me to create a different mindset. He asked me to be uncommon. And between Walter Payton, of wanting it more than anybody else, it was a mindset that was easily programmed and eventually became habit. Now, to just show you how it can become a part of you without you even knowing it, but others will resonate about you and notice it about you, I got to fast forward almost 10 years later. playing for the Chicago Bears. I'm in training camp. It is week 5 of training camp where everybody is physically, mentally exhausted. Last practice of the day, conditioning at the end of practice. And we would do a variety of things. But we would do something that would simulate the game of football. And football is explode, recover, explode, recover. So on this particular day, we're going to run a series of 40-yard dashes. We lined up and we started. And we were about halfway into it. My position coach stopped us. He said, Robbie. Now, Robbie was a guy that we had drafted that year as a rookie, about 6'1", 210 pounds, ran a 4.240. You can be as dumb as a box of rocks. If you can run a 4.240, you got a shot. Because you have elite, rare speed. He said, Robbie, how fast you run the 40? He goes, oh, coach, he put his chest back. The rest of us are panting. I run a 4.240. Really? You run a 4.240? Yes, sir. He goes, you sure? Positive. He goes, you were at my workout. I was at the combine. He's all right. Merril, how fast you run the 40? I didn't run a 4.2. I'm thinking, you know what, this ain't even fair. And I actually got mad. I wasn't even answering. He goes, how many years you played? I said, almost 10. He goes, how many games you started and played in the NFL? I said, I don't know, about 120. He goes, you ever missed a practice? I said, no. Now he's starting to get in my wheelhouse. I was feeling a little better about it. He goes, all right, what's the fastest you ever ran a 40? Now I had to go back a few years. I remember for the Green Bay Packers, I ran a 4.68. So I used that. I ran a 4.58. Now 4.58, 4.68, still not a 4.2. They're not even comparable. He said, Rob, you run a 4.2, you sure? He goes, yes, sir. He goes, well, then could you explain to me something? Every time we do this 40-yard dash conditioning drill or any other, how come he beat you? I went all the way back to standing on my bed at 12 years of age and pinning that thing up, that find a way card up on my wall. How my boundaries expanded. People like Chuck Noll and Chuck Noll and Walter Payton, who have inspired and given me key ingredients to be successful in the National Football League. Things that I learned from other people that have helped me expand the mental capabilities and challenge and capitalize on the physical skills that I had. I am grateful to those people. Now, how can all of these things you learn inside the white lines, can they be used in life? Do they resonate in life? I can say a resounding absolutely. On February 14th, 2003, I would field a call in my cabin in Idaho from my doctor confirming I had cancer. He would immediately outline what was ahead of me. I was going to go bald. I was going to have a series of chemotherapy treatments that were going to last up to 9 hours every 21 days, and they're going to hit me with a truckload. And he couldn't promise me that it would work. Now, I will tell you this, after you filled that call, your boundaries are extremely narrow. But the one thing that I love more than anything in the world, more than playing in the National Football League, more than working at ESPN right now, I love being a dad. I love the teaching aspect of it. I love the love aspect of it. I love the patience of it. I love the growth of it. And one thing that I've tried to do as being a parent is communicate with my kids from the day they could start talking till to today. And one thing I have found is that my find-a-way philosophy has been a great parenting tool for me. When they come to me with problems, I'm like, well, you know what, let's find a way. And I kind of put the burden on them. I challenge them to come up with a plan. And it's been very helpful in me as a parent with my kids and them taking ownership on things they want to accomplish, things they have to overcome. So the first thing that I really want to do is I need to tell my children. Now, I didn't want to alarm them or scare them, but they need to know. Because in about 17 days, I was going to be bald. I was going to be sick. I was going to be in bed a lot. There was going to be a lot of things that were going to change, and I wasn't going to be able to hide from them. So I went downstairs, and I gathered them around with me, my daughter and my son. And in the elementary way, I explained to them what was going to go on. Now, my daughter, who was 9 at the time, she could sense this was something different than just I'm going to be a little sick and I'm going to lose my hair. And she ran across the room, and And she threw her arms around me, and she whispered in my ear. She said, well, Dad, you're going to have to find a way. And I will tell you this, not in a million years did I ever think it would be reversed on me. But my boundaries went from here to here. Dying was not an option. Being sick was not even an option. Going bald was going to be an option. And that was going to happen. Now, to tell you the difference between a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, because my son was 7, he goes, well, Dad, now can we go to the Bass Pro Shop? Because that's what 7-year-olds think about. They're like, let's move on. And I said, well, I'm going to need that too. I'm going to need that. I'm going to need that laughter. But what my daughter did is she forced me to expand my boundaries. I didn't know what my plan was going to be. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I wanted it more than anybody else, and I was going to have to be uncommon in this approach. So the first thing that I did, kind of similar to what I did when I wanted to play, and I studied the very best player I'd ever play, I needed to find people that had been through this, those that had survived it. After talking to about 5 of them, I was not any more excited or any more motivated, other than one thing: they were still alive. That moved me. Now, going into this, I did think I had some things to my advantage. I am fanatic about hunting, yes. I'm fanatic about health and fitness, too. And I was going to continue on that plan. Regardless of it being 8 or 9 hours and all the treatment and how long it was going to be, I was going to do that. And I formulated this plan. I was going to train right afterwards. I was going to stay with the basketball team that I was playing for. And hopefully that would help me through this process. As I went in for my very first treatment, I would probably discover what my greatest battle would be. And it wouldn't even be cancer. When I walked in, my doctor was standing at the table filling out some papers, and I wanted to be the very first one in there. And I was in there at 6 o'clock in the morning because I was going to be there 9 hours. But through all of my studies and questions, I had really never asked, how does this stuff work? How does chemotherapy work? Does it work like an antibiotic? Does it work like an aspirin? I didn't know. So I just happened to tap him on the shoulder, and I was like, can I ask you a question? I go, how long does the chemotherapy take to work? He dropped his glasses, and he looked at me and said, in seconds. And I was a little taken back. I said, seconds? He said, we will know in seconds if it works or it doesn't work. So with that said, I sat in my chair, they hooked me up, and I started to go through the process. A bunch of bags would change, IVs would change. And about 5 hours into this treatment, my nurse changed. She had what looked like she was going into a nuclear plant suit on. And she carried this syringe that was about this big because she had it in 2 hands, and it was red. Now, I'm not going to give you the medical term. I'll just give you what they nickname it. They call it Red Death. And she brought it into me. She said, now, this is the most dangerous aspect of the whole treatment, and that's why we must push it. Because as it rips through your veins, you're going to feel it within seconds. So they had me chew on ice so that my mouth would be cool enough that the chemotherapy wouldn't form blisters in your mouth. Well, once she got done with that, I had enough fluid in me to last a lifetime. I was like, I got to go to the bathroom. And she said, well, when you go, I want you to flush twice. A little embarrassed. I'm like, well, why would I need to do that? She said, what I've just put in you goes in at 100% potency. It's going to come out of you the second you go to the bathroom at 80% potency. And if it splashes up on the porcelain, it'll eat it. That gives you an idea of what chemotherapy is about. And it gave me an idea of what I was up against. But I will say this, that the challenge by a 9-year-old, the lessons by a great football player and a great head coach, and a philosopher, helped me sustain and get through that by really mindsets that I was able to create, habits that I was able to formulate. I continued to play for my basketball team, and in a 6-month period, I didn't gain a pound, I didn't lose a pound. Aside from being bald, you probably wouldn't even know I was going through chemotherapy or had cancer at the time. And I attribute that to so many things. But the things I learned inside that white line helped me immensely. Now, what does it ultimately mean to you and tonight? 2008 was an amazing year for you. I know you had 2009. There are all kinds of economic challenges out there. I sit in a room full of people that have already challenged themselves mentally. But I will challenge you one thing further, that you haven't challenged yourself as far as you can challenge yourself. You have capabilities you never dreamed of as you sit in this room. And sometimes it does require to be challenged and just say the simple term of find a way. Because I am sure this year there are several challenges out there that you must face. And here's how I know in this room, as brilliant as you are, as good as you have been, that you can even be better. Because shortly before I was diagnosed with cancer, I had read a book, and I can't remember the whole story other than the devastating effects of chemotherapy. The person eventually made it through it. But I remember closing that book going, there is no way I could ever do that. I would never be able to handle that news. I would never be able to go through chemotherapy. And I did it. And in this room, 2008 was amazing. 2009 has the ability to be equal to or greater than because of your abilities that you already possess. You ask yourself to find a way at whatever challenge may come your way in 2009. You take whatever habits you have, expand them, evaluate them, and create others if you must. Want it more than anybody else out there because you have competitors. Want it more than they do. Be uncommon in your approach. And I know the next time I walk into a Bass Pro Shop as a customer, I'll be proud to be a part of this night. Good luck to you in 2009, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. I know we have a few more minutes. If anybody wants to, I told them I'd do a little Q&A if you guys had time or wanted to. I'd be happy to do it if anybody had any questions. And quite honestly, you can even ask me stuff about hunting and fishing because it's really up my alley. Yes, sir. The best advice, I know there's no book on this, and we had this discussion where, I don't know, Charlie's even here. There he is right there. We had this discussion actually on the way here. I know there's no book on it. Here's a piece of philosophy I have used with my kids in almost every scenario, and people that friends of mine that are becoming new parents, is that I think, first of all, you have to have love and patience. Have to be a big part of it, and you have to be a teacher. You have to think in a teaching mode. But I use this philosophy with them. I measure my children in the yardsticks of their years, not mine. When my 7-year-old does something, or my 12-year-old now, Bo, my son, does something, he's 12 years old, I'm 44. I know a lot more than he does at 12. And I have to understand, what does he know at age 12? And how much is he accountable for? How much is he not accountable for? And that has helped me. I coach like that. I teach like that. If I ask myself that first, I probably understand why they spilt the milk at 3. It's 3. That's what you do at 3. You don't realize that you're making a mess for me. We just accidentally at 3, we do those things. So I have always used that as a philosophy when I'm dealing with my kids, I'm teaching my kids. And I try to demand that they take ownership on their life, and we constantly talk about that. I do those things over and over and over again with them. I teach as much, I forecast with them as much as I can, I prepare them as much as I can, how to handle things, how to deal with things. And those things have been successful, but we constantly are in communication with all those things. And I will tell you this in that process, I'm probably the winner in the whole deal. I learn more. My kids are now open enough to tell me when I'm being an idiot and doing things stupid. So, and you know, if you can just kind of put your ego aside, you're like, yeah, they're right. You know, kids can be great at having perspective on life and putting you in your place. But those are the things that I've tried to use that have helped me. Yes, sir. Well, it's actually a great question. I'm asked that a lot. And you know what's going to go back to my kids. I think you hear a lot of people look and reflect on their life and think of all the things that you're doing wrong or you haven't done right. And I'll tell you this. I remember my drive home. I was diagnosed actually when I was in Pittsburgh, and I had to drive to Cincinnati. It's a 4-hour drive. So I had a lot of time to reflect. And the one thing that I reflected on the most was my kids, that I was like, I've been as good a dad as I could possibly be. I'd spend as much time as I could spend with them. We've communicated as much as I communicated. I love being a dad, and that probably inspired me because I lost my mom when I was young, and I know how hard that was on me and my 3 boys. So to survive it became almost pivotal just for my children. I really didn't, maybe because there's too much to reflect on I was doing wrong to get on that, but I was actually proud that I didn't look back and go, man, I wish I'd have spent more time with my kids. I didn't have that one regret, and I was most grateful for that. But I wanted to be there for them for the remainder of their critical years. But I still use the perspective many times when decisions have to be made. I go back to that moment of that doctor. It's way too long a story to tell you, but I will tell you this. The day they thought I had cancer, they didn't tell me. They told me I had a back problem, which I originally went in for. And they sent me to a specialist, which I thought I was going to see a back specialist. Even to the day when I pulled up in the morning, I'm like, God, why would I go to a cancer facility for a back problem? It wasn't until I got in the room that they were looking at the scans, and they're like, God, it does look like it. And I finally said, what? They go, it looks like cancer. I don't have the words, and I don't think anybody could truly help a person when they hear those words, and they look at that straight in the face. You ultimately think that now it's a matter of asking how much time, and that did run through me, but it put a perspective of me makes decisions easier for me. When I'm indecisive on something, I go back to that perspective, and I can make decisions much easier now. Yes, sir. What kind of bow? Well, I got a switchback, Matthew Solo Cam switchback. Absolutely. In fact, I didn't come here to get a new bow, but I'll tell you this, I would take one. I mean, I love bow hunting, so, and I know Matthews was probably the wrong one to say, wasn't it? But it's really ultimately, that's what I shoot. And really, well, here's how you're going to hook me too, because actually it was given to me. That's how I started bow hunting. It started out with a Hoyt, was my first one, and then they gave me a Matthews. But I'd take that up on, and that's what I'll hunt with from now on. Promise. Any other questions? Steelers. Well, one of the place I actually liked to play the most was actually, I liked and hated. Actually, they win both of them. Cleveland. In their old stadium. I could tell you this, if you ever went to that stadium or were part of that stadium, football was started in Cleveland Stadium. That was part of, Pittsburgh and Cleveland and Chicago and Green Bay area. You could literally, it was the only stadium that I would go in early and go sit in the stands and just look out at the field when it was empty. And I swear to you, you could literally see ghosts of football past out there. You could literally see guys with leather helmets playing out there. That's how old that stadium was. And their locker room was just like it. Their locker room was as big as this stage right here. Your training room, your locker room. It was the oldest, grungiest stadium, but it had probably some of the deepest history that I ever played at. My favorite outdoor memory. It's funny, one of them popped into my head when, I can't remember what you guys were talking about, but where my cabin sits, it sits on part of the Snake River that's dammed up. And I took my kids out for the very first time fishing. And my daughter, I want to say, was about 7. My son was probably around 4. And she caught a fish. She caught a rainbow trout, about 4.5-pound rainbow trout, beautiful fish. And we wanted to take pictures when we were done. And here's a great example of, you constantly measure a child or a kid in the yardstick of their years, not mine. She's 7 years old, first time she's ever been fishing, wanted to hold the fish, to take a picture. How would you hold the fish? All of you, everybody out there, you grab it like this, hold it a particular way. She held it like a doll, because that's all she knew how to do. She had the head right over here, and she had and it is the greatest picture I have ever had. And it's a great example. She hadn't been taught. It was her first time fishing, so she's like, well, hold it. Okay. Let me take the picture. Sits up on our cab. In fact, I don't know what you guys were talking about. Maybe it was, keeping our youth active in the outdoors and that stuff. And that's the first thing I thought of, was my daughter holding that fish after she caught it.